54 minutes after 6 o'clock. Welcome back inside the Now Morning Show. Now, every Monday we have a chat with the TTPS, and this Monday is no different. I want to welcome Inspector Michelle Lewis to the set yet again. Good morning, Inspector.
Good morning to you. Good morning to you, ma'am.
Good morning, Inspector. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. We really want to say thank you to TTT Now program for really having us on a Monday morning.
You are
and on
most
any
welcome.
occasion, because the opportunity that you present us allow us to look at where we are in delivering our resources and service to the community, and how we can build that confidence and trust with the community through you.
And I think it's also important for us to be able to say, well, yeah, let's have honest conversation on the television first thing in the morning, so everybody gets an idea. They get to meet the TTPS. They get to understand why you all do things that we may not understand all the time.
Right.
So this morning, well, I mean, for the past however long now, people talking about the crime rate, right? And it's always the police fault that the crime rate high. Don't mind the police, don't do the crime. Well, let me not say that. Let me say that the police aren't solely responsible for the crime rate. Is that fair?
That's politically correct.
I try to be sometimes, right? But recently, people have been, saying that the crime rate has been going up, and there was a high rating that you all received the other day. What can the police actually do about the crime rate in Trinidad and Tobago?
So we did receive a high rating through the World Population Review. They ranked Trinidad and Tobago 6th, right, per capita,
right.
Which is indeed high. And so we do acknowledge that our homicide rate is high, and it is what tips really our serious crimes.
Okay. Really,
is the homicide, and of course larceny motor vehicles. But we've seen reduction in every other area. Having said that, one of the things that the police look at mainly, and when we look back at a couple months, maybe from October or so, we have a department within the organization that we call the Specialist Evidence Recovery Unit, where we say SERU. Right. And at that unit, it is a one-stop shop. So we use that unit for scientific reasons in relation to crime fighting and detection of crime. So you have the SERU, where you use SERU to be able to analyze scientific data in relation to DNA, ballistic testing, fingerprint impression. So there are three main areas in relation to crime fighting and solving crimes: detection rate and the solvability rate. And those three are the DNA, the ballistic from firearms, and the fingerprint impressions. So we say that the DNA is like the golden bullet.
Of course.
The ballistic is the silver bullet, and the fingerprint impression is the bronze bullet.
I've heard of this before. We've watched Law and Order. We watch these shows online and things where we see the police going through all of this stuff, right? My question to you is, how vast is our database of DNA? Because if you find DNA on a scene, how do you match it back to somebody?
Our database in relation to fingerprint impression is very populated, and it is so because a lot of persons, a lot of organizations, private or otherwise, within the public service and private sector, make it mandatory almost to have a certificate of character. And so once you do that, you enter our system. And so that system, that fingerprint impression is there, so that if anybody at any point in time commits an offense, the fingerprint impression would be there. We also have in the law where, for example, the police brought in someone, but for whatever reason we did not charge. The law also provides us to be able to still take the fingerprint impression of the persons,
right,
so who came into custody, and have that database. So our database is widely populated, and so we have that. What we didn't have before is the use of technology in relation to the ballistic testing and the DNA testing, particularly because when you look at, for example, the murder that took place in Tobago in 2019, that we got directive from advice from the DPP to charge on it, and the person was charged last week, Thursday. That offense, those double murder happened in 2019, but it was solved in 2022. And it was solved. One of the main pieces of evidence that really, caused the decision to be made was the DNA testing from a lab overseas. Now in Trinidad, we have officers who are qualified in natural science, who will be able to support the Forensic Science Center and SERU in relation to turning over matters, forensic evidence at a quicker rate. So you have persons from the armory down there. You have, of course, from from the system from CRO there as well, where you have it being taken at a shorter rate of time. So you would see in not too distant future that turnaround in and the increase in rate.
But Inspector, so you mentioned something about the detection rate, and I know one of the concerns that the Commissioner of Police had when we got the rating is that he was talking about there's a difference between the detection rate and the homicide rate. I mean, what's the difference between that? All
right, so the homicide rate would speak to fatal persons who died, murder rates. The detection rate would be those that the police was able to detect that the offense was committed and be able to detect that, okay, this is what was the outcome. So it's not so even if the matter, for example, was closed, when we say closed, right, it would be closed detected as opposed to undetected, meaning that there was nothing in relation, we found nothing to conclude anything in relation to a matter.
So that's how the figures don't match, because sometimes you detect something years after the murder was done.
Right, and you solve something years after the murder was done. So the murder rate is what actually happened at the point in time, and then you have to investigate it to get detection and the solvability rate.
So detection doesn't mean solved?
Well, because you have some matters that are solved, and you can use it intermittently, because you have some matters that are closed, detected, and closed, non-detected, but it was solved.
So how is it undetected?
Okay, so for example, let us move away from murders, because to be able to
we talk about different bicycles.
But then you move away from serious offenses, right? So if you were to move away, there are some offenses that are undetected, and there are some offenses that are detected. So, for example, an offense that to be undetected. Nothing comes to mind. As we keep talking, something
I just trying to understand how our case could be closed or solved if it's undetected. Because to me, it's like I need to detect, and this is me with no police training, right? I just using basic English and literature, right? If we're saying I have to detect that you have done something wrong, or that somebody has done something wrong in a situation before I can solve this problem.
Okay, for example, someone comes and make a report and indicate, for example, that the vehicle was stolen, was broken into, an offense happened. But we have no data to prove how it would be closed. For example, the finger, let's say, for example, rain had fallen that night, so there's no fingerprint impression or anything like that, right? Nothing was taken out of the car, but it was broken. So there was an offense that took place. So an offense took place, but to be able to close it, you can close it because there's no evidence surrounding to say, well, we can actually pinpoint and say there's no footage around that you can see, that you can be able to pull data from, or scientific or technology from, to be able to help to aid to close that matter detected.
So detected is when you use the ballistics and the DNA and that sort of thing to see who the perpetrator was?
But detected for serious crimes. But we're talking, remember, you open it up and you said regardless of the offense. So detected would mean that you have data, you have evidence, whether scientific or otherwise, in relation to the solving of an offense.
And if you don't have that information?
And if you don't have that information, you can still close the matter undetected, because there is nothing.
But then it's also unsolved.
Right, but there's nothing that you have no leads to go anywhere further with the matter.
Interesting. Because to me, that just seems like you could just do that for almost anything. You could say, well, we have nothing for it, so we're going to close this undetected.
No, but remember, we encourage persons to come to the fore and make a report. Right? Sometimes we don't want person to say, well, we don't want to because we don't have anything. Sometimes, for example, and this is just generally speaking, right? Something, for example, somebody will give a description of someone. They may not be able to, but then next 2 weeks, somebody will give a description that's similar. So when that data comes to CAPA now, and we analyze, we'll be able to say, well, all right, on this in particular, we realize that around 2 to 3 p.m. or a.m. that somebody fits in this description is over. So we'll send the patrol to that side and that kind of thing, right? So, for example, with the homicide rate, we have seen that the homicides are not only gang-related. We see that sometimes it's because of land dispute, property dispute, and that kind of thing. And that is one of the reasons why we now have the community justice clinic, where you have attorneys who come in free of charge and go to the various community with the support of the police service, and go into various communities to talk about the law and disputes and conflict that members of the community and family would experience that sometimes turn out to be
fatal.
Fatal.
Yeah.
So these are some of the strategies that the organization have been putting in place. It is one of the tenets in relation to the current strategic plan of the organization 2022-2024. That is one of the things that we are really pushing, using scientific data and evidence in relation to solving crime, because we know that sometimes when you depend on statements from persons based on
Pressure.
Sometimes, right.
It's
so we
pressure.
have to find, because we need to solve.
Yes,
homicide affects everybody, yeah?
Of course.
I mean, I'm a police, but I'm also a member of the community.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's affecting your neighborhood, or it will impact me as a person. It will impact my family, and of course, so I'm on both sides. You know, so it is important for us as an organization who also form part of the community
To bridge the gap.
to fix it. And we have been making strides in doing it. We are seeing the changes. We're expecting to see that steady increase with what we have done, what has been implemented at SURI. We're expected to see that
continue to help improve situations.
To help improve the situation.
Inspector, I want to thank you so much for joining us yet again. I know this conversation could go on for quite some time, but unfortunately we're out of time, and we're going to see you back again next week, Monday, God's willing.
It's wonderful being here.
It's wonderful having you. You can clarify all these things and make sure that everybody's clear on what the role of the TTPS is and what you guys are doing. But
we're really happy to be here.
We're going to take a quick break and come back with more inside the Now Morning Show. Thank you so much, Inspector Michelle Lewis of the TTPS. When we come back, we're going to get into some public utilities and so much more. Stay tuned.